You are listening to the HR Happy Hour Network, home of the At Work in America podcast. The HR Happy Hour Network is sponsored by WorkHuman. HR is about to change for good with the power of human intelligence. By combining AI and the rich data of WorkHuman's #1 rated employee recognition platform, human intelligence answers HR's most demanding needs, unlocking insights and capabilities that redefine talent management, cultural transformation, and employee engagement, ultimately elevating performance and, above all, people. The future of HR has arrived. Will you and your company be a part of it? Learn about human intelligence at workhuman.com and join their force for good. This episode of At Work in America is sponsored by Paychex, one of the leading providers of HR, payroll, retirement, and insurance solutions for businesses of all sizes. Are you ready to crush the year ahead? The 2025 Priorities for Business Leaders report from our friends at Paychex is here, and it's packed with insights from 600 companies on how to drive growth and get ahead. This isn't your average data dump. It includes actionable strategies on everything from attracting new hires to improving employee retention, managing HR compliance, and leveraging technology to stay competitive. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and tackle 2025 with confidence, download the report today at paychex.com/AWIA. That's paychex.com/AWIA. It's free, it's insightful, and it might just give you the edge you need. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome to At Work in America, the podcast that leads the conversation on the future of work. Proudly sponsored by Paychex and WorkHuman, we go beyond the headlines to uncover bold ideas, fresh perspectives, and the real stories of people shaping workplaces for the better. And now, here are your hosts, Steve Bose and Trish Steed, bringing you the insights and trends that will inspire what's next in the world of work.
Welcome to the At Work in America podcast. Whether you're a longtime listener or joining us for the first time, we're glad you're here. Be sure to hit that subscribe button as well and stay connected with us. My name's Steve Bose. I'm joined by Trish Steed. Trish, how are you?
I'm fantastic. It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well. And we have a great show today. We're talking about leadership, which for such an important topic, sadly, I don't think we cover it enough on our podcast. It's been a while. And we've got a great person here to talk about leadership, who's Phil Wilson. And hi, Phil. How are you?
Hi, Steve. Hi, Trish.
It is great to have you with us. Let me introduce Phil to the audience. We are so excited to welcome Phil to talk about leadership approaches that empower teams. Phil is the CEO of LRI Consulting Services, Inc., and the founder of Approachable Leadership, where he and his team help clients thrive and create extraordinary workplaces. Phil is a national expert on leadership, labor relations, and creating positive workplaces. He's regularly featured in the business media and is a highly regarded keynote speaker, trainer, and author of numerous books on labor relations and creating a positive workplace, including the forthcoming book, The Leader-Shift Playbook, which we were lucky enough to get an advanced copy of. I won't lie about that. And so we'll talk about that plenty on the show too. Phil, welcome. How are you?
Thanks. I'm doing great. It's great to be on, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Great to have you. Phil, maybe give us, I read your bio, it's brief. I'm sure there's plenty more we didn't touch upon. Maybe tell us a little bit more about you and your leadership journey. It's so fascinating, some of the things we read in the book too, about what you do with teams, internal and external. So, but let's learn a bit more about Phil.
Well, I started out in life. I grew up in Oklahoma. Our company actually is 47 years old this year. So my dad started the business, and I started out in life as a labor lawyer. So we do a lot, you mentioned in the bio, but I do a lot of sort of labor relations stuff. And like, as I was coming up, that was what I was going to do. But if you've spent really any time around, labor relations, issues and dealing with unions and things like that, a lot of times a lot of the issues that sort of blow up in that space are really like leadership issues. So I quickly started like running into, leadership issues early in my career. And then the longer I did it, the more I just was like, look, if you really are going to help clients solve, these labor problems, you need to get like much better at the leadership side of it, right? Because that tends to be the flashpoint for a lot of these issues. So that's kind of how I ended up also becoming a leadership. I'll say a student, not an expert. I'm still learning. That's one of the points that I make in the book. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got here. And our company, like you said, we're a consulting business, but what gets us out of bed is helping clients create extraordinary workplaces, which really begins and pretty much ends with the relationship that you have, with your boss, and that's really what the book's about.
I'm so glad that you're sort of saying that's what led you to this point in your career. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what made you decide to become an author, right? This isn't your first book, but what kind of sparked that? Because I think they say everybody has at least one book in them, but most of us never do that. What got you down that path?
I've always loved to write. I've written, when you're a lawyer, so I started out as a lawyer before I got into the consulting business, but you do a lot of, writing, not like book writing, but, and then I got to where I wrote a lot of labor related stuff first. So I've got, several either book chapters that I've written or long form articles. And then I wrote, a book called Left of Boom, which is about, proactive employee relations and positive employee relations. So I've written a number of books, but like I love to write. And then as I got really passionate about leadership, my last, this book and then the last book were leadership focused books. So the Approachability Playbook was my last book, and then this is the Leader-Shift Playbook.
Yeah, Phil, I think it's fascinating that you made that pivot but also made that connection between leadership and what's happening in the workplace with issues like, sure, as a labor attorney, there was myriad issues that felt like they were more about policies or rules or things like that. And maybe a couple levels deeper, they were merely more about relationships in the workplace. And you spent a ton of time in the new book talking about relationships. And I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I sum it up like this. Like, people don't wake up in the morning going, the only thing missing in my life is I'm not a Teamster, right? Like they decide, they seek out a union because they're having problems at work. Like there's things that are frustrating them and things that are not happening that they'd like to solve. And they have attempted, union is pretty much at the bottom of the list of things that you attempt if you're trying to fix things at work. And so they've tried kind of everything else, and they land there. And so in my career, I've been like eyewitness to a lot of leadership train wrecks, right? And then when you're trying to like turn that around and improve a workplace and improve the employee relations, you really have to improve the employee relationships, right? Like that's at the bottom line of all of it. And so that's a leadership thing. You've got to teach leaders how to create better connections and how to create a space where people feel safe and comfortable coming to you if they've got a problem. All of those, and those, some people are natural at it, but often it's not natural. You promote people that are just like the best operator, and you plug them into a leadership position, and you don't really give them any training or resources. And so and that mistake gets just repeated over and over and over again. And so that's really what sort of drove me to, leadership. And then really looking around and not finding a lot of stuff that actually worked, kind of led me to like, okay, well, try to figure out what does work. And I landed on this approachability behavior. I think it's a not taught very much and really a critical behavior. And that's what the last book was about, but I still talk about it a lot in the Leader-Shift Playbook as well.
One of the things that I found most interesting, and it started with the name of the book, Leader-Shift Playbook. And as I'm a little bit skeptical because we don't do a ton of book reviews here because they're usually boring. But my first thought was like, playbook, really? Like, is this going to be something that's tangible, actionable? How am I going to feel about this? Right from the start, like you are immediately drawing people in because you're giving your own personal approaches to leadership, but also some struggles. And so I found it really relatable compared to other, there's a million other leadership books out there. And so I want to just applaud that, because if someone's listening, I would say, if for no other reason than the way that you approach the topic, I think it stands out as different. What I would want to know, though, I guess, is what can leaders do to sort of share that vulnerability? Because I think we all think we're pretty good leaders, and maybe we are at times, but it just seems like we might overestimate our own abilities as a leader. So how do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, like the book starts, I thought I was doing a pretty good job as a leader. I had a successful company. I was going around the country, teaching people about approachability, and I was like, the cobbler, whose children had no shoes. I was not doing a good job of leading my own team, and as I say, I was at the top of Mount Stupid. I thought I was pretty good at leadership, and I was terrible. So the tip for leaders, and like how, you got to get yourself in that space where you're willing to kind of be wrong and willing to kind of go, maybe I don't have this figured out. Some people, there's two sides to that. Some people are like, I'm never going to get this. I'm a failure as a leader. Like that, they can talk themselves into, I'm never going to be good at this. And that's not right. But you really also have to make sure that you're not in that spot that I was in, where it's like, yeah, I think I'm doing really good. I don't think I have a lot to learn about this leadership stuff. When if you actually ask around, and that's what was most important to me, and that would be sort of my tip. Because you're right, I'm all about like action. What are actions, and what's the play you run? The play you run is like, you ask customers, your company asks the customers like, hey, do you like the product that we're making? Do you have any suggestions about how we can make it better? Your customer for a leader is like your team, right? Are you asking them, how am I doing? Is there anything you wish I would do more of? Is there anything you wish I'd stop doing? Like those, being willing to have those conversations, that your team will tell you what they need. But it's really kind of getting yourself to that point where you're willing to make yourself vulnerable to feedback that you may not enjoy hearing. But the thing that's great about it is like, the more you do of that, and if you just kind of make a little bit of effort, your team will help you. Like they will give you the answers, and they will let you know like, hey, you're doing great, or hey, you're kind of still screwing up. But that is a team that's going to thrive.
Yeah, I think when I was reading it, I was relating to it so much because, like you say, it's like we want to get that feedback, but often just sort of with the politics of workplaces, even if we're going to our team and saying, whether it's, 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, and you're saying like, oh, give me some feedback, they kind of feel like, maybe I don't want to be the one to like hand and say. One really interesting technique I learned many years ago from a boss I had in healthcare would always say it's important on the way that you phrase it to people. So we would say, okay, here's how it's operating. Here's how I'm operating as a leader. What would make it even better if? Because I think we get focused on like just the negatives. And I loved how you didn't phrase it in that same way, but many of the exercises throughout the book I felt were really, you talk about the difference between yuck and yum. And to me, that was it. It's the yum, right? It's what would be even better if I did these things. How do you personally kind of think about the difference between that yuck leader and the yum leader? Because it's that, glass half full versus half empty.
Right. I mean, part of that's like the shift in your belief in yourself, right? So I start off by talking about you're having an impact, whether you like think you are or you're not, like you are. And that impact is it can be a positive thing, it can be a negative thing, and it's always happening. So like that's kind of where you have to start. But then that next phase is that, believing in yourself, and this sort of approach of yum and yuck. You can think of it as glass half full, glass half empty, but like the way that you look at your team, the way you look at the world around you is going to affect the way you behave in that world. And that behavior then ripples, so if you're kind of looking around for what's going wrong, you're going to see a lot of stuff going wrong, and you're going to react, in a way that like, why is everything wrong? if you look at the world a little bit more like yum, and Trish, it's like, it's a great point. So you're a chef, right? And you have like made this great meal. You still, and it's yummy. Like people like it. They're like, oh, I really like this. You still can ask the question, like, what would make it yummier, right? So if you're kind of looking at the world for yum, you're going to, again, be looking for different things. You can still ask for feedback. But you're going to see things that you wouldn't see if you're kind of looking for what's wrong. And so that's, I think, a really important behavior for a leader. And this isn't like Pollyanna rose-colored glasses necessarily, but it's just like, look for what's going right. Assume that things are going right. Don't start from like everything's wrong. And then you still have an opportunity to make improvement and to ask about improvement and to help push. That's, your team is the same thing, right? You can have a yum or a yuck about your teammates. Look for opportunities to like grow them and to, and that can sometimes be tough feedback, right? It's like, hey, look, I think you're capable of a lot more than what you're doing, but that still is coming from a positive place of like, I see this potential and I see what I believe you can do. And I don't even know if you see it in yourself, but I want to help you and encourage you to get there. Like that's a totally different worldview than a lot of, managers and supervisors have of just like, wow, that person blew it again. And I guess I need to go like, ream them out again today because they just can't seem to get it, get this thing right. That is going to always be a negative relationship.
Yeah. Phil, there's a really good example in the book where you talk about in your own organization, where you looked at one of the long-term members of the organization and asked her to, hey, we think you can do more and evolve into this other role, which is maybe involve some learning, some training, some things you've never done before, but we really think you can do it, right? Because sometimes people won't even raise their own hand to do that, to ask for more or to stretch perhaps because they're comfortable or maybe they don't have that confidence. And it does require a leader or the other team members sometimes to show a little bit of belief in them, right? And support as well. And I love that story in the book in where that person then is thriving, right, in a new role, an expanded role, and it's better for everybody.
Yeah, that's Laura. And the cool thing about that story is she, we were pushing her to grow. And it's totally true. I tell it in the book, but like one of the times I went in to like give her feedback, she was like, well, am I getting fired? Right. She thought like I was coming with a pink slip. And I was like, no, like you're doing great. But that's why we had Debbie, that whole story. Like we had Debbie kind of present to her, hey, we have this growth opportunity. It's going to be tough and you're going to have to learn it. But the thing that's the coolest part about that story is just how she blossomed as a leader in the rest of her life. And so she continues to grow in that organization. And it's been super fun to watch her journey.
I like how you mentioned it helps you grow in the rest of your life, because I think sometimes we feel like we're operating in a vacuum when we're in that capsule of work, and both having not been a leader for a number of years and then being a leader. One of the things I saw was often if someone is having or struggling maybe with something at work, it's because they're struggling in something in their personal life. And I think a good leader, part of being a good leader is being able to sort of spot that. And not that you're trying to dig maybe into what the exact personal item is for that person, but really just saying, I'm here, I'm here to listen, maybe giving them a little slack, right? Some of the things, being tuned with your team. You talk a little bit about that in sort of that believing in others. And I like how a minute ago you mentioned like assuming the best, right? In a situation or of people. What kind of feedback have you had as a leader, or do you give the leaders you work with when it comes to kind of assuming the best about your people?
Yeah. Well, I want to go back just briefly to the point that you made about like this. So one of the things that we teach when we do workshops, and we have a page on the website, so approachable leadership.com/research. A bunch of that research is about how this behavior of being approachable, of being someone that people feel safe coming to and comfortable coming to, transforms every relationship in your life. Like, and it has huge personal benefit on top of the work benefit. We like to start the training kind of like, hey, look, even if you don't care about leadership at work, like this is going to help you in all of your relationships in your life, because it really gets people to buy in and think about, oh, wow, like I could like up my game at home. I could up my game with my friends and in my community. So, these relationship building skills are transferable, anywhere. So I think that's a really, important point. And then back to, that's the hero assumption is what I call this sort of believing in others. This book actually started off, I have an amazing editor, Janet Goldstein. So in addition to making me rewrite the book like 3 times, we also changed the title, but the original title was going to be The Hero Assumption. So it's really hugely important to me, this idea of the hero assumption. But the whole point of the hero assumption is that you believe in others, you believe in your team, you believe the best in them. And so even on a day, when someone is failing, even on a day when someone's struggling, your immediate reaction to that is not like, oh, there they go again. They don't know what they're doing. They don't care. Nobody, in addition to not getting up and wanting to be a teamster, you also like don't get up going like, how can I screw up today? Like your assumption as the leader needs to be like, if someone is struggling or failing, I got to get in there and find out like what's happening. And Trish, to your point, that could be there. Maybe there's something going on outside of work that's impacting this. Maybe they're afraid to ask for help, or they they don't know how to do something, and they're afraid to kind of let people know that they need training on something. Like there's all kinds of things that can happen that can be the cause. And as a leader, you need to be curious about it, right? It's like, I know this person wants to do great and they're not really doing great right now. What's happening? I need to go figure that out. That's the hero assumption. I believe in you. I believe you have what it takes. There's those 3 questions I talk about that like nobody ever asks you, but as a leader, you need to be getting across all the time, which is, I like you. I think you have what it takes. And I think you're worth the effort, right? If you're struggling with something, I need to get across to you, like, look, I know this is hard. I know it's going to take some time. But you're worth the effort. Like you got this, and we're going to get there together. Like if you're answering those 3 questions, you're winning as a leader.
Phil, I always felt like, for me, right, especially in my big corporate types of jobs I had, I was just a member of team, had managers and had leaders. I always felt like, often anyway, that the leaders themselves or the team manager or whatever the title was, weren't always necessarily supported themselves in understanding some of these concepts, but also learning how to do them, right? As you mentioned earlier, right? We see this so often in organizations. A really good operator, a really good engineer, a really good coder, a really good salesperson, whatever the role is, right, gets put in a managerial position because they're just good at doing the job, right? And they've got good performance. But most of what we've talked about here for 20 minutes, and most of what's in the book, quite honestly, well, all of it really, it's not about being an engineer or a coder or a salesperson, right? It's being empathetic, being vulnerable, showing that belief in your team. And I guess my question is, Phil, what can organizations sort of do better to better equip these managers to be the type of leader, right, that we're describing here? Like what are some things that have worked in your experience?
Yeah. So, it starts at the top of the organization. It did in my case. So like the story of our company is about my own transformation. So it really needs to start there. Cause like you said, Steve, leaders have leaders too. Right. And it's, it sort of turtles all the way down. You have to, if my relationship with my boss isn't great, I'm probably going to treat my own team like not great. So part of it is that organizationally understanding, like we have to support leaders at every level of the organization. Now that said, I've definitely experienced and seen places where even though the top level leadership isn't that great, as long as you're investing in and really helping that first level leader, there's a lot of, there's a lot of like, bad things that can be happening sort of above that level. If that relationship's strong, like the culture is going to be good. Like the at least the day-to-day experience of the people that are like first level doing the work, they're still going to have good experience because they have a good relationship with their boss. It is very hard though, Steve, if the level above that doesn't care or is pushing or is like, is like, hey, why are you spending time, doing, talking to all the people on your team? Like you need to be driving them to perform. That can definitely lead to a lot of like negative things culturally. So, as far as like what organizations can do, I mean, first of all, is just recognize and even people that are just like hard as nails business people, you got to understand this like people stuff isn't like an option, right? So if you want to have a successful business, if you want to have a business that performs better than your competitors and performs at a high level and attracts the best talent and keeps the best talent, if you want to have a business like that, this is like mission critical. And so part of it, you kind of have to make sure that when you're talking to the top of the organization, is really helping them understand, like, if you mess this part up, and going back to the whole like promoting the best performer, a lot of times you end up losing your best performer because now they're in a manager job that they're going to fail at. You are building into the system that we're going to have a bunch of crappy leaders. When you get leadership, actually thinking about what they're doing, they're all like, oh yeah, this is actually really dumb. Like, why do we do it this way? So that's the point where you're like, okay, if you want to solve this, you need to, first of all, if you're going to promote someone who's a high performer, because the other problem with promoting a high performer is they're better than everybody else that they're leading. And so their immediate reaction, going back to hero assumption, is like, well, you're never going to be as good as I was. So like, yeah.
That's I'll do a sports analogy, right? I think you're a sports guy, Phil, right? That's why they've said traditionally in sports, the best players often make the worst coaches or the worst general managers, right?
Yeah.
And often it's for that reason.
Yeah, because the stuff that comes naturally to you doesn't come naturally to most people. And so that's the big risk of promoting like the top performer. But even if you do that, as long as you give them the training and the resources and sort of point them in the direction of your team's going to perform a lot better if you are vulnerable, if you are thinking about the best of them, if you are kind of pushing them and helping them grow, if you can get them oriented that way, high performers like get that, like that, they push themselves in that same way. So once you kind of get them tracked that way, you can be a high performer and a great leader. But a lot of people, if you don't give them the tools and if you don't teach them, that's not really where they're going to start. And then, you're going to have a bad culture.
Phil, one of the things in the book, I don't want to give too much away because we want people to buy the book. I think the changes that you're talking about are also things that are not expensive, narrowly, right? It's all about self-awareness and being aware. I think as someone who's been a leader for many years, right, it's different than a new leader, right? Our experiences, we kind of get in the rut of we think we're doing this great, right? I would love you to talk a little bit about some of the actionable exercises in the book. And it can be more high level. You don't have to necessarily give them away. But one of the things I appreciated was going through, you call them assignments. And it was literally like the very first one. When I did it, mind-blowing. And I feel like I know a lot about leadership. So could you maybe just talk a little bit about why you put assignments in the book and how that can actually benefit the reader?
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about the first assignment. I don't mind giving that away because I love it. And it really does like positively impact the world if you just do it. So that's we call it the everyday leader exercise. But the basic idea is to go back to the hero assumption. If you think about who in your life was that leader that like believed in you, that maybe pushed you, that kind of like saw you at a different level than you saw yourself, you know, and as I describe that, most people, that person just like sort of leaps to mind. Okay, so like, who is that person in your life? And then the assignment is very simple: reach out to them, call them, or shoot them a text, or whatever your preferred like mode of communication is. But like, reach out to them and just go, hey, you know, I was asked to think about an important leader in my life, and I thought of you. And those reach outs are powerful. It's so weird. The universe works in a very strange way, but like a lot of times the day that you reach out to that person is just like, wow, I don't know why I tell the story, but like that's happened in one of our classes where it's, you know, I don't know why you picked today to reach out to me, but like, I really needed to hear that today. But it's a really simple exercise. And, you know, Trish, you and Steve, you've been through the book. Like, there's a lot of exercises in there. None of them are complicated. It's not that it's easy, but you know, it's not that difficult. The difficult part is sort of like getting yourself in a point where it's like, I will make that call. I'm going to make myself a little vulnerable. I'm going to ask people to tell me like, how do they feel like I'm doing, which I don't, you know, like, you know, people want to avoid conflict or avoid like bad news. Right. So, getting yourself kind of over that's what the exercises are for. And they're also for reflection. So going back to this idea of like, you know, are you on Mount Stupid or not? Like, part of that is like reflecting on your week. Like, what kind of conversations did you have this week? And like, be real with yourself. And how many of those were kind of, you know, yum conversations, and how many of those were yuck conversations? But that sort of reflection helps a leader, you know, really start to understand like, okay, I need to do more, or I can be better. And so that's what the exercises are all about.
Yeah, I'm so glad they're in there because I'm someone who needs sort of those to take. And you're right. It wasn't that it was that hard. It was just, I think it's just none of the exercises were things I've ever considered. And I've been a leader for a long time in different groups and, you know, different types of organizations.
You
I
reached out to
think
your leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
I did. And it was funny because I happened to have already scheduled a call with this man. He was my leader like 12 or 13 years ago. And by the name of Bill Garber, we worked in public relations together. He is one of the smartest humans I've ever met. And so I already had this call scheduled with him, but then I did the exercise and he was the person that just popped in. Okay. And I didn't know I was going to need to call him. And so you had talked about like what made that leader stand out. What were the behaviors? Right. And I said, I'll tell you what I wrote down. I wrote down, he's direct with his feedback without being unkind. Army guy, like, you know, forceful, but never unkind. And also I put, he was an expert in his field. Where my mind was blown was then you kind of turned it around and you're like, the things that you admire in other people are the very things that people admire in you, right? Or that you're strong at. And that's where I went like, oh my gosh, I am direct with feedback. Hopefully without being unkind. Maybe sometimes I have been. Or expert in my field. So yeah, that was just definitely like a big aha moment. I will tell you, when I talked with him, not only did he feel good about hearing the feedback, right? The things that he was telling me that he had never told me before when I was working for him or with all these years later, what a great way to get feedback so far after the fact. And him saying like, I'm proud of where your career has progressed
Yeah.
too. Still meant a lot. I don't know. It was just, from that one simple exercise, I think you changed 2 lives.
Yeah. I love to hear that. I mean, it's you know, that's why we teach it. It's a great exercise. And, yeah. So anyone who's listening to this and watching this, like, go do that. You don't even have to buy the book. You got the exercise now, but, it's really powerful having those conversations, you know, with teammates, with your parents, your, spouse, your kids, like that. Like, those are really powerful, moments in people's lives. And we, I don't know why we don't just naturally do it. But it's a lot of times it's hard to kind of get to that point, because it does feel vulnerable, and so you're kind of like scared to do it. And then we just sort of default to like not doing the slightly scary thing. And then Trish, your experience is, that's basically everyone's experience. It's like, wow, it's like I will never forget that conversation.
Right. Well, I think you touch on, like, we're afraid of feedback, really. Because maybe we don't like ourselves in that moment, or about ourselves, right? Maybe we're feeling negative. That happens. And leaders have that happen. And so, yeah, I think that's why you have to get the book, because there are so many exercises in there to remind yourself how to have those conversations, because we're not really taught how to ask for feedback in that way. I operated a little bit under never ask a question you don't want the answer for.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I'm being honest,
Right.
But really, maybe I'm anticipating a negative answer, and maybe it's not negative. I don't guess. Yeah, I would say for me, the book stands out because I don't see this as like a book you read necessarily cover to cover, 10 times. I feel like you read it and then you keep going back to it and redoing the exercises with new people, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
learning more about yourself as you grow. I wish I would have done this like at 33, and again at 44, and now at 54, to compare how. I don't know. To me, I think it's such a valuable book for that reason. I think it's timeless.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. I hope that it impacts people's lives. I really just want to help leaders lead better. We measure, like at our company, we measure our success. It's not how many dollars came in or whatever. We measure our success by the number of workplaces we impact. And that's basically just a proxy for the number of leaders that we impact, because we know if we impact a leader, we're impacting all the daily experience of like everybody around that leader at work and at home. And so that's what hopefully this book will do, is to just impact a lot of leaders.
Yeah, I think it will, Phil. Honestly, it's a great read. It's not a hard read. It's not some complex 37-step system to implement, right? With complex rules or algorithms. It's very straightforward. It's approachable, practical exercises. And you guys were talking about contacting the leader in your life. I still feel badly I haven't contacted mine, but I will. I'll reach out to him. But it also
that's your homework assignment.
It makes you think about, well, why did I pick this person? And you think, oh, I need to sort of act more like that person did. Like there's a reason I thought of that person, right? So I think it's valuable for that. So Phil, I know we got pre-release copies of the book to read before the show today. Maybe you can let folks know when the book's coming out officially, and then certainly how to find it.
Yeah, published date is April 1st. Okay. So like we like to say, no fooling. The book is on April 1. And the easiest place to go, I mean, you can, it's up basically anywhere you can buy books, and you can order it now. Easiest thing to do is go to yourleadershift.com. And that's got, especially if you want to bulk order, there's a button on there. So like if you want to order it for, leaders on your team, that's the best place to do that. You get a discount if you order multiple copies.
Yeah.
You don't get that on like Amazon or other places, but you can buy it pretty much anywhere books are sold. And yeah, it comes out April 1st.
Awesome. Yeah. Highly recommend it.
And I would also say, if you have a leader that you do appreciate and want to have a better relationship, buy it for your leader. You don't have to be a leader buying it for yourself. Buy it for your leader. That might just open that communication in a whole new way, right? In such a positive way. So that would be a challenge.
There's good exercises there. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's good exercises in there that you could be like, look, I'd like to have this conversation with you. So you share the book with you, and then we can have the conversation where it's not like, hey, here's a book about how you can be a better leader to me.
Right.
But it's like, I want to grow. Right. And I'd like for us to be kind of speaking the same language about this. That would be a great way to do that.
Yeah. Awesome. Great stuff. Well, great, Phil. We really appreciate you taking some time today. Love the book. Thank you for sharing it with us and with our audience. So we'll put all the links you mentioned in our show notes as well, and encourage folks to check it out. Find Phil, connect with Phil. Thanks for listening, everybody. Make sure to subscribe. And Trish, thanks to our friends at Paychex and Work today for making this all possible. And Phil, once again, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Great stuff. All right, Trish, great stuff. Thank you. I loved it. I could see you were, this was a good exercise for you because you got like energized from reading this book.
And I still have to go back and do some of the other exercises. So you just wait, Steve. I'm going to be your best coworker ever.
I love it. All right, great stuff. So thanks for listening once again. My name's Steve Bowes. For Trish Steve, for Phil Wilson, our guest. We'll see you next time. And bye for now.
Bye, everyone.